For most people, a royal guard is a symbol, a red coat, a tall bearskin hat, a stoic stare that never falters, a tourist attraction, a photo opportunity, a part of London's identity, polished and regal, standing before Buckingham Palace like a living monument. But Sergeant Rowan Whitmore was not a monument. He was a soldier, first, last, and always. And the story of why he recognized that little girl silent, please, starts long before that.
It happened in just a heartbeat, one tiny hand raised above the crowd, a quick motion almost too small to notice. But for a veteran royal guard standing in perfect formation, that single gesture shattered centuries of tradition. Why would a little girl signal a soldier in the middle of a royal parade? And why did he against every rule freeze turn and halt the entire procession? Something was terribly wrong, and what he saw next changed the story from ceremonial spectacle to life or death urgency. Before we dive deeper, make sure to hit like if you enjoy true Royal Guard stories, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one we post at the same time every day. And hey, share this video with someone who loves the royal family. They'll thank you for it. The morning at Buckingham Palace looked like something painted for a postcard, sunlight catching on the gold of the gates, a soft breeze brushing through the flags, and crowds packed shoulder to shoulder, waiting for the parade to begin. It was one of those days when the city feels alive, when tourists raise their phones high, when children squeeze forward for a better view, and when the entire world seems to slow down just long enough to watch the Royal Guards march. No one expected anything unusual. No one thought this day would be any different from the 1,000 ceremonies before it. And yet, hidden inside that cheerful sea of visitors, one little girl was fighting a storm that nobody could see. She stood close to the barriers, more quiet, lost in the noise. A pale blue dress hung off her shoulders, and her hair was tied neatly in a braid. But her eyes were the kind that aged a child before their time. She barely blinked, she barely moved, and she definitely wasn't smiling like the other children. Izzy-Ter stood a man too tense, too alert, too sharp with every movement. His hand wrapped around the girl's wrist, squeezing whenever she shifted even a little. Anyone watching for more than a few seconds would have felt something was off. But in a crowd of hundreds, people tend to look past what they don't understand. Except one man 10 feet away, in the rigid precision of the Queen's Guard formation, Sergeant Rowan Whitmore stood like carved stone. Straight posture, chin lifted, rifle in perfect position. To most people in that crowd, he looked like a statuette, ceremonial figure meant for photos. But Rowan wasn't just a guard. He wasn't just someone in a red coat and tall bearskin hat. He was a soldier with years of service, a man who had trained his body and mind to notice danger even in the smallest movement. His eyes, though fixed straight ahead, took everything in. The rhythm of the drums, the shuffle of the crowd, the excitement buzzing in the air, and then her. The little girl didn't bounce or point or whisper happily like the others. She stood as if she was trying not to be seen, as if any sudden movement might bring consequences. Rohan felt the wrongness before he even understood it. Instinct spoke first quiet, sharp, unsettling. Something about her posture, her rigidness, her silence. And then the man beside her tugged her wrist again, a little too hard, a little too controlling. Rowan's heart tightened. He had seen that look before in war zones, in refugee camps, in places where children learned fear long before they learned their own names. Still, he couldn't break formation over a hunch. Not yet. The military band began the opening march, brass instruments shimmering in the sunlight, drums echoing across the courtyard. Cameras flashed. Children squealed with excitement. The parade had officially begun. The man beside the girl shifted, adjusting his grip. This time, her sleeve pulled back just enough to reveal faint, bruisey zello, purple, old, new. A pattern no accident could explain. Rowan's stomach dropped. His body stayed still, protocol demanded it, but his awareness sharpened like a blade. He didn't blink. He didn't breathe too deeply. He simply watched, studied, calculated. And then it happened. The girl looked up at him. Not around him, not past him. Directly at him. Her eyes locked onto his with something beyond fierce, something close to desperation. A silent plea only someone trained to recognize subtle signals would notice. The crowd cheered as the guards shifted formation. Drums thundered. The man at her side bent down, whispering something sharp in her ears, something that made her shoulders curl in as if she could fold herself invisible. Rowan's jaw locked. He couldn't step out of line, couldn't break rank. Not without an undeniable trigger. The girl swallowed hard. She looked again at the guard. S towering figure like he was the last lighthouse in a storm she had been stuck in for far too long.
Her small hand rose, slowly, deliberately. Rowan saw the palm, open, facing, outward dot. Then he saw her thumb fold into her palm. Then her fingers curled down, trapping it. The signal. The emergency hand gesture used around the world to silently say, "Help me. I'm in danger." His heartbeat slammed once, hard. Then everything inside him went still. This wasn't imagination. This wasn't guesswork. This wasn't misinterpretation. This was a child begging for rescue without speaking a word. Rowan's training activated in an instant. He had learned this signal during a mandatory safeguarding briefing introduced during global lockdowns, taught to soldiers, police, frontline responders. The signal had saved lives countless times and was designed specifically for situations where a victim couldn't speak. He recognized it on the very first motion. But for a moment, a tiny, impossible moment, he froze. Not out of confusion, but out of the weight of the decision. Breaking formation meant breaking protocol. Breaking protocol meant consequences serious. One's guard simply did not move unless ordered. 5 centuries of tradition said, "Stand still." But 5 centuries of tradition had never looked a terrified child in the eye. The girl's hand trembled. She held the signal longer this time, more clearly, more desperately. Then, just as quickly, the man noticed. What was that? He snapped. His fingers clamped around her arm with enough force to make her gasp. The crowd noise swallowed the sound, but Rowan heard it, felt it like a needle in his spine. The man pulled her toward him. "Don't do that," he hissed. "Don't you dare." Rowan's breath left him in one controlled exhale. He had seen enough. The parade continued. The band played. The guards marched in perfect unison. But Rowan Whitmore felt a line inside him snap clean, certain, absolute. A child was in danger. Right there, Dot, right now, Dot, 10 feet away. The world narrowed down to her eyes, Dot to her. Trembling hand, Dot, to the silent message she risked everything to send. Help me, please. Rowan didn't move. Not yet, but he was going to. Nothing, no rule, no tradition. No order was going to stop that Dot, because formation might be sacred, but a child's life was more sacred still. And the moment the man yanked her again, Rowan felt his muscles shift, his weight subtly redistribute, his heartbeat slow to a soldier's calm. The next decision he made would shatter royal protocol and change 2 lives forever.
Summer morning, long before he took ceremonial duty, long before he stood in that historic uniform. Years earlier, Rowan had been deployed in Afghanistan. Hostile terrain, unpredictable threats, long nights where every shadow felt like it carried danger. Out there, survival depended on noticing what others didn't. A misplaced step in gravel, a wrong kind of silence in the wind, the tension in a villager's shoulders that signaled fear instead of peace. He learned to read people like maps. In the desert, a glance could tell you if someone was hiding something. A twitch could warn you of an ambush. A trembling hand could reveal a child in distress long before words were spoken. Those instincts never left him. They followed him home, followed him into every assignment, followed him into the Queen's Guard, where tourists thought he was simply a decoration, but where his mind stayed sharp, scanning, cataloging, assessing, always ready. That skill was the reason he saw Lily, really saw her, in a crowd full of people who didn't. Most visitors saw excitement. He saw the way her body folded inward, the way she stood too still for a child, the way her eyes darted every time the man beside her shifted. He recognized survival behavior. He'd seen it in refugee camps. He'd seen it in children who'd lost everything. He'd seen it in the victims of violence who didn't know how to ask for help. So when Lily's hand rose, when that tiny thumb curled into her palm, when her fingers wrapped over it in a universal silent scream for help, Rowan didn't doubt it for even a heartbeat. He didn't need her to repeat it. He didn't need more signs. He already knew, but knowledge didn't make the next decision any easier, because now the weight of 2 worlds crushed together, protocol versus instinct, tradition versus humanity, duty to formation versus duty to protect. It wasn't a simple matter of stepping out of line. It was the kind of action that could end careers. Guard do not break formation. Not for noise, not for disturbance, not for any of the foolish things tourists sometimes try. But the signal Lily used wasn't foolish. It wasn't random. And it wasn't something a child would do by accident. Rowan replayed everything in seconds. Her bruises, her stiff posture, her flinch every time a man touched her, her eyes heavy with fear, her silent, deliberate gesture for help. His training demanded response. But the ceremony demanded stillness. The band shifted into the next segment of the march. The rhythmic pounding of drums echoed through the courtyard, like a countdown he wished he could silence. Formation rotated. Guards pivoted, toes pointed, rifles aligned. Everything perfectly choreographed, except his heartbeat, which now fought against every rule drilled into him over the years. He inhaled steady, deep, controlled. His mind flashed back to a briefing 2 years earlier, a classroom, a PowerPoint slide, a speaker from a child protection unit explaining the newly adopted hand signal. He remembered the officer's words clearly. If you see the signal, you must assess and respond immediately. Silent signals exist because victims cannot speak. That line had stayed with him, because in war zones he had met people who couldn't speak. Fear had stolen their voices. Trauma had locked their words. Lily's silence was the same. Her eyes said everything she couldn't dare say out loud. The man beside her tugged her sharply, snapping Rowan back to the present. The little girl winced. The movement was small, but pain always tells the truth. Rowan's fist tightened around his rifle. The pressure against his palms grounded him, steadied him, reminded him why he carried that weapon. Not as a decoration, but as a protector. He watched her sleeve slide back again. Another bruise. Another fingerprint. Another piece of a puzzle that didn't need more pieces. In the crowd, a few nearby tourists noticed too. A woman frowned. An elderly man whispered something to his wife. But no one moved. No one acted. Because most people, even when they sense danger, doubt themselves. They second-guess their instincts. They hope someone else will handle it. But Rowan wasn't someone else. He was the one who had to decide. Because he was the closest. Because he understood the signal. Because he saw what no one else saw. Lily was running out of chances. A sudden memory hit him. Harsh, sharp, unwelcome. A small boy in a village miles from base. Afraid. Silent. Rowan's unit had passed him, without realizing the boy was signaling for help, too frightened to speak. They found out too late what the child had endured. The guilt of that memory never left Rowan. He had promised himself, years ago, that he would never overlook another subtle cry for help. Not again. Not ever. And certainly not 10 feet from where he stood. The parade moved into its centerpiece moment. The point where the formation tightened and the guards froze into perfect stillness. Tourists clapped. Phones rose higher. People leaned forward to capture the iconic shot. Rowan didn't hear any of it anymore. All he heard was his own breath and the echo of that briefing officer's voice. If you see the signal, assess and respond immediately. Lily looked at him again. Her eyes were glossy now, shining with the beginnings of tears she didn't dare let fall. Her lips parted like she wanted to speak, but fear froze every muscle. Her small shoulders trembled. The man noticed her glance again. "What did I tell you?" he hissed. His hand dug into her arm hard enough that her knees wobbled from the pain. That was it. That was the moment the decision made itself. Rowan didn't think. He didn't calculate consequences. He didn't weigh protocol against punishment. He moved. Not visibly yet. Not enough for the public to notice, but enough that his stance shifted from ceremonial stillness into silent readiness. He planted his heel deeper into the ground, adjusted his balance, prepared his breath, steeled his mind. He was waiting for exactly one more trigger, something undeniable, because once he broke formation, there would be no going back. Then it came. The man grabbed Lily's wrist so hard she made a tiny sound, barely audible, but filled with pain. A sound no child should ever make. A sound that told the truth more clearly than words ever could. Rowan's heart slammed once like a final signal. And at that precise moment, he knew he was going to break 500 years of tradition. He was going to stop the parade. He was going to reach that little girl. And nothing was going to stop him. Before the next beat of the drum, before the crowd could sense a shift, before the man could drag her away, Sergeant Rowan Whitmore began to move. The next chapter would change everything. For most visitors gathered at Buckingham Palace, the parade unfolded before them was a polished masterpiece. Precision, symmetry, discipline. The guards marched in perfect rhythm, their boots striking the stone in a heartbeat-steady cadence. Cameras clicked. Children pointed. Tourists murmured in awe. But beneath all that ceremonial perfection, something else was happening. Something no guidebook, no tradition, no tourist expected. Sergeant Rowan Whitmore broke formation. He didn't lurch. He didn't shout. He didn't betray panic or haste. He simply turned. One clean, decisive pivot. A movement so exact, so controlled, that at first the crowd didn't even register as wrong. It was as if their minds needed a second to understand that a royal guard, one of the most famously immovable soldiers on earth, had just moved on his own. Then gasps rippled through the front rows. People raised their phones higher. A few whispered, "Is this part of the show?" Others shook their heads. Because it wasn't. Everyone could feel it wasn't. Even the sound changed. The parade music still played, but somehow it no longer felt cheerful. It felt tense, off balance, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Rowan walked directly toward the man and the little girl. His steps were measured, deliberate, steady as a heartbeat. Not rushed, not hesitant, just purposeful in the way only a trained soldier can be. His eyes never left the girl, even though ceremonially, he should still have been staring straight ahead. The man froze. The little girl froze. The crowd parted instinctively, as if pulled by gravity. The bear fur hat, the red coat, the gleaming brass buttons. None of it looked ceremonial anymore. On Rowan, in that moment, the uniform looked like what it truly represented: military authority. Real authority. The kind that carries centuries of discipline behind it. The man tightened his grip on the girl's wrist and tried to step back into crowd. Rowan's voice cut through the courtyard like a blade. "Sir, stop right there." It wasn't loud. It wasn't shouted. But the tone was absolute. The kind of command that stops grown men in their tracks. The kind drilled into soldiers who've trained for battle, not for tourists. The man's fake smile flickered. "What's the meaning of this?" he said, trying to sound polite, but his voice quivered. "We're just leaving. The ceremony is over for us." Rowan didn't blink. "Release the girl. Now." The man's grip tightened reflexively. He hadn't meant to, but fear and anger clamped his fingers even harder around her small wrist. Lily flinched. Her hand trembled, and the sight of that trembling was enough to flip a switch in Rowan's chest. 22 feet behind him, the formation of guards remained perfectly still, but Rowan knew they were watching, not with their heads. Those stayed facing forward, but with the awareness drilled into every soldier. Tradition held them in place. Duty held them silent. But Rowan was no longer bound by ceremony. He was bound only by the sight of a child in danger. The man laughed, a hollow, rattled sound. "She's my daughter," he said loudly, hoping the crowd would hear and sympathize. "She's fine. We're fine." She used a distress signal. Rowan's voice cut through the lie cleanly. A signal for immediate danger. The man stiffened. A few nearby tourists, already filming, whispered to each other. Did he say distress signal? One murmured. "Is that a thing?" Another asked. The tension grew heavier, thicker, like fog rolling across the courtyard. The man's jaw tightened. His eyes darted around, searching for an escape. He tugged Lily again. "Tell him you're fine," he whispered sharply in her ear. But Rowan heard it. He took one more step forward. It changed everything, because now Rowan wasn't just a guard approaching. He was close enough to intervene. "Young lady," Rowan said gently, softening his tone. "Are you all right?" It was the first time anyone had asked her that question in months, maybe longer. Lily's lips parted. Her eyes searched Rowan's face. She looked up at him the way someone looks at the last door out of a burning room. Before she could speak, the man cut in, desperate. "She's shy. She doesn't talk to strangers. This is absurd. You're making a scene. She..." Rowan shifted subtly, not aggressively, just deliberately, blocking the man's path. The message was clear. "You're not going anywhere." A palace security officer started moving the crowd toward them, speaking urgently into his radio. Another followed from the opposite side. The ripple of attention was spreading. Phones were recording from every angle. The man's mask cracked. "What signal?" he snapped, anger rising. She was just fidgeting. "Kids fidget. Stop making assumptions." "I saw the signal," Rowan said simply. The crowd heard the certainty in his voice, quiet, factual, unwavering. Soldiers don't speak with that tone unless they are absolutely sure. The man tried to push past Rowan. That was his last mistake. Rowan stepped into his path with the precision of a soldier intercepting a threat. His boots planted firmly, his shoulders squared. His presence became a wall. "Do not move another step." The man's voice rose in panic. "Get out of my way. She's my stepdaughter." The crowd inhaled sharply. Stepdaughter, not daughter. A detail people rarely mention by accident. And Lily? She flinched again. Her sleeve slipped back. More bruises showed. The crowd found their voice. "Oh my God!" "Look at her arm." "Someone stop him." "Call the police." The man grabbed her arm harder, trying to drag her away. Lily gasped, a sound too small to matter to the parade, but loud enough to shatter Rowan's restraint. Rowan moved. His training didn't show itself like in action movies. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't flashy. It was controlled, precise, efficient. "Sir, release her. Now." The man yanked Lily again, and Rowan stepped forward in a single, decisive motion. The The crowd reacted with collective gasp as he reached forward, his hand moving with trained accuracy, intercepting the man's wrist with controlled, professional grip. Not violent, just firm enough to break the hold, without harming him. Step back. The man stumbled. The pressure was enough to make him lose balance, without falling. Rowan didn't need to hurt him. Just stop him. "Don't touch me," the man shouted, panic overtaking him. "She's lying. She always lies." Lily's body trembled. Her eyes filled. But her voice, small, shaking, finally escaped her. "He hurts me." Everything went silent. Every phone recorded. Every tourist stared. And something inside Rowan steadied, became even more certain, because the hardest part of saving a child isn't the action. It's earning the child's trust long enough for them to speak. And she just had. Palace security arrived. A female officer knelt beside Lily, gently lifting her sleeve. Her face hardened instantly. "Sir, you're coming with us." "What?" the man shrieked. "You can't. She's my responsibility." Rowan's final words landed with military finality. "Not anymore." The man's protest dissolved into noise as security restrained him. Lily's knees wobbled. Rowan lowered himself slightly, just enough for his voice to reach her, without towering over her. "You're safe now. I promise." The parade music still echoed across the courtyard, but its meaning was gone. Something far more important had happened. Something no ceremony, no tradition, no rule could overshadow. A guard broke formation. A man was stopped. A child was saved. And the world would never forget what happened next. For a long moment after the man was taken into custody, the courtyard outside Buckingham Palace felt strangely quiet, almost muted, as if the air itself needed time to catch up with what had just happened. The parade music faded. The drums softened. Tourists lowered their phones, but kept staring at the little girl, and the guard who had broken 500 years of tradition to protect her. Lily stood trembling, wrapped in a palace-issue blanket. Her small fingers clutched the fabric, like it was the only solid thing she could hold on to. People nearby wanted to approach her, comfort her, say something, anything. But no one dared interrupt the fragile moment unfolding between her and Sergeant Rowan Whitmore. Rowan knelt so he wouldn't tower over her. He removed his bearskin hat, the first sign that this moment wasn't ceremonial anymore. It was human, real, and deeply personal. "You're all right now," he said softly, in a tone he hadn't used since comforting frightened children in conflict zones. "He can't hurt you." Lily blinked up at him, uncertain. Her voice was small, cracked, almost non-existent. "He said no one would believe me." Rowan gave a slow, steady exhale, the kind a soldier gives when calming someone who's been living too long in fear. "I believed you," he said simply. That was enough. For the first time, a tiny spark, fragile as a candle, lit in Lily's eyes. The palace responds. Within minutes, palace medics escorted Lily to a private room inside the staff building. The walls were quiet, the lighting warm, and the air carried none of the fears she'd been breathing outside. Rowan followed to give his official statement. Security officers filed detailed reports. Tourists recorded the incident off of their footage. Witnesses stepped forward eagerly, finally able to say what they had noticed but hadn't known how to act on. The elderly couple approached Rowan directly. "We saw the bruises," the woman whispered, voice trembling. "We didn't know what to do. Thank heaven you did." Rowan gave a polite nod, but inside, he felt the weight of responsibility settle deeper. He had acted, yes, but Lily had been living this nightmare long before today. A female police officer named Harris was assigned to Lily's case. Calm, collected, and trained for exactly these situations. She knelt in front of Lily with a gentle smile. "Sweetheart," she said softly, "we're going to take care of you. No more fear. No more secrets." Lily hesitated, then slowly pushed her sleeve up when asked. Officer Harris's expression tightened instantly, not in disgust, but in determination. "These weren't accidents," Harris murmured. Lily lowered her eyes. "He said I fall too much. He said, I caused trouble and I deserve." "No," Rowan's voice broke the room's silence like a shield thrown down between her and the past. "You deserve safety. And you didn't get it, but that ends now. Lily looked at him again, the same way she had looked at him before signaling for help, like he was the last solid thing in a collapsing world. The truth comes out. As the hours unfolded, the truth began pouring from Lily in cautious, trembling pieces. Her mother had passed away. Her stepfather had become her sole guardian. The cruelty started small, sharp words, cold punishments, unpredictable anger, then escalated into bruises, threats, locked doors, withheld food. She had tried once to tell a teacher, but was convinced no one would believe her. He said, "No one wanted me," she whispered. Rowan felt something inside him twist, not anger, exactly, but something heavier, something like heartbreak mixed with fury. Soldiers are trained to keep emotions at bay, but something slipped past armor. Officer Harris placed a comforting hand on Lily's back. "That man isn't going near you again. You're protected now." "But where will I go?" Lily asked, gripping the blanket tighter. I don't have anyone." The room fell quiet. The question wasn't small. It wasn't easy. It was the kind of question that breaks a child before they even know what life is supposed to feel like. Rowan looked at her. Then he looked deeper, past the fear, past the bruises, past the silence. He saw a child whose courage had saved her own life. He saw someone worth protecting, not just for today, but for every day after. "I can take her," Rowan said suddenly. Officer Harris turned, surprised. "Temporarily? For emergency placement?" "Yes," Rowan confirmed. "I'm registered with the regiment's family support program, certified as an emergency foster guardian." Lily's head snapped up. "You want me?" Rowan knelt again, no hesitation, no doubt. "If you want me," he said gently. Her breath caught, her eyes filled, and then she did something she hadn't done all day. She moved toward someone willingly. She stepped forward, one careful step, then another, and placed her small hand in his. A new beginning. By late afternoon, the paperwork was complete. Background checks cleared. Protocols followed. Approvals granted. The palace gates opened not for a parade this time, but for Rowan and Lily walking side by side, no longer strangers. His ceremonial uniform was gone. He wore simple civilian clothes. But the soldier in him was still there, strong as ever. Only now, that strength had a new purpose. Lily held his hand with surprising firmness. "Will I have my own room?" she asked quietly. "You will," Rowan said, "and you can decorate it however you like." "Can I have books?" "As many as you want." She hesitated. "And will you stay? Even if I cry sometimes? Or make mistakes? Or get scared?" Rowan stopped walking, kneeling again to meet her eyes. He spoke the most important promise of his life. "I'm not going anywhere, Lily. Not today. Not tomorrow. Not ever. You're safe with me." Her eyes overflowed, not with fear this time, but with something warmer, softer, stronger. Hope, justice, and healing. The man who hurt her was charged with multiple counts of abuse. Witness videos, Lily's testimony, the medical reports, and Rowan's statement formed a case so solid it took the court less than a week to order his permanent removal as a guardian. He was sentenced. He lost every right he once used to control her. He would never hurt another child again. And Lily? She flourished. Therapy began slowly. Soft-spoken questions, gentle guidance, careful steps toward healing. She learned to laugh again, to sleep without trembling, to walk without flinching. Rowan helped with homework, packed lunches, read bedtime stories in voices funnier than he expected himself capable of. And 6 months later, inside a small council office decorated with children's drawings, Rowan signed the final adoption papers. Lily became Lily Whitmore, a soldier's daughter, a survivor, a child who found safety because someone dared to break formation. The world remembers. News outlets covered the story. The palace released a statement praising Rowan's actions. Millions online learned the signal for help because Lily used it bravely. And the question people kept asking was, would I have noticed? Would I have acted? It was a question worth asking because one soldier did, because one child dared to hope, because one moment of courage changed everything. And that is how a royal guard, rooted in centuries of tradition, made history not by standing still, but by taking one step forward.